The funding for this program is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and the Friends of 4, 10, and 12.
Tomorrow, voters in 2 southwestern Idaho irrigation districts will be asked again to decide the future of a hydropower project here at Lucky Peak Dam east of Boise. Tonight, we'll look at the arguments for and against that project. Good evening. On and off for the last 8 years or so, there has been an effort to construct a hydroelectric project at Lucky Peak Dam, just a few miles upstream on the Boise River from Idaho's capital city. Tomorrow, voters in 2 irrigation districts, voters who just a few days ago rejected that project, will be able to vote again on the idea. The proposal has created substantial controversy in southwestern Idaho, both for the reasons of who the project will benefit and because power generated by the proposed new facility at Lucky Peak would be sold out of state to the city of Seattle. Backers of the project say they must move quickly on the Lucky Peak proposal by June 1st, or they risk losing the federal license allowing construction at Lucky Peak. Supporters also say the deal with Seattle City Light is a no-lose proposition that guarantees a substantial return to the irrigation districts involved. But opponents counter that the project benefits only a handful of the irrigation districts that have an interest in Boise River water. And further, they say the sale of electricity out of Idaho will eventually cost this state's consumers through higher electric rates. Tonight, we'll try to sort out these conflicting arguments over whether the Lucky Peak project makes good sense. We begin tonight with Royce Van Kuren. He's the manager of the Boise Project Board of Control, which consists of 5 irrigation districts, Boise, Kuna, Big Bend, and Wilder, which have already okayed this project, and the New York and Nampa Meridian districts, which will vote on it again tomorrow. Mr. Van Kuren, why should the voters in those 2 districts approve this project?
The voters should approve this because of the need to generate new revenues for future operation and maintenance requirements. The background for the pursuit of new revenues are the 1926 repayment contract with the federal government that granted some power revenues from the river projects, and then the infringement on the power right by the Corps of Engineers dam. But the revenues are fast reaching the point that the land's beyond the land's ability to pay.
In other words, you need the revenue that you would derive from this project to basically operate the system of canals that gets the water out to the people who use it.
To continue to meet the inflation spiral.
As I mentioned, when this was considered for the first time just a couple of weeks ago, those 2 districts which will vote again tomorrow narrowly defeated it. It didn't get the 2/3 vote necessary in 2 districts. Why was that?
I'm not sure. Of course, I would think that a 2/3 majority is a hard fact to come by in any instance these days, but I'm satisfied that we didn't educate or inform our people well enough.
There does seem to be a good deal of confusion about a number of aspects of this project. What do you see as the most confusing part of it, and frankly, why some people perhaps were confused enough to vote against it last time?
Like, the real question appears to be the sale of the power, and it would appear that the power is going out of the state. I don't know as we have answers for all of that, but we've done the best we can. The power handling, once it's produced, is really not our business. We don't intend that it be our business. So we really can't answer that.
It seems to me that one of the arguments that some of those on the other side of this issue from you have made is that in essence it's not fair that only 5 districts out of, I think the total is 56, right, in the valley, will benefit from this project. Just in terms that I can understand, why are just 5 of 56 involved?
Well, early on, the feeling was that the benefits maybe should be spread broader than that, but the 5 districts were granted the hydro rights at Arrow Rock Dam, and none of the others were given that right under contract. And
Arrow Rock is the dam just upstream, again, from Lucky Peak.
that is correct. And but the pursuit of that revenues mentioned in the contract is what got us down to the 5 districts, and the 5 districts are more or less a unit, and while they may only represent 5 districts, they probably represent half or better the lands along the Boise River that are irrigated from the Boise.
And well, I guess the bottom line, again, in just layman's terms, is that those 5 districts are the ones who went after this project, right?
That's right, and we discovered almost after the fact that to try to bring anybody else in was a hard fact. It just, you can't change your mind every little bit, we found out.
Well, let me ask you finally, Mr. Van Kuren, just by way of a summary statement here, you have worked for a long time to bring a project about to utilize that hydropower potential at that dam. This is the best deal possible?
To me it is, because it retains the ownership is retained locally. It doesn't mean that the contract to sell to Seattle is a permanent thing, but to keep the ownership
and the 50-year contract. Right?
Yeah, that is correct, and but to retain as much of it as we could seemed to be the best possible deal. The money, I'm not going to really speak to the money. The figures boggle my mind when you get to the total
Okay.
money.
We'll come back in a moment, sir. Thank you. The other view of this project tonight comes from Harry Vogt, a member of the Farmers Union Irrigation District and a leader in a group called the Boise River Water Users, a group that's formed to oppose this Lucky Peak project. You heard the arguments Mr. Van Kuren makes. Why should there be a no vote tomorrow, Mr. Vogt?
Well, first I'd like to say that we believe that the water should be harnessed. In other words, we're in favor of a power project,
Okay.
but we're not in favor of the way it's being done. We think the project as being proposed by the Boise Project is grossly unfair to a lot of the water users on the Boise River. As was pointed out, they represent a little more than 50% of the water users or the acreage. But the older rights on the river and all the land on the north side of the river and also part of the towns on the south side of the river and part of the land on the south side of the river are split and would receive no benefit from the project. What we would like to do is go forth with a new application including all the Boise River water users, including the 5 irrigation districts.
All 56 of those districts.
Every one that is using water from the Boise River. You see, our company, for example, has vested interest in the 3 reservoirs on the Boise River. Our irrigation company paid for construction of the Arrow Rock Reservoir. We're now paying operation and maintenance. We're still paying construction costs on Anderson Dam and O&M. Then when we get to Lucky Peak, many people think that Lucky Peak was constructed for flood control, which it was, but there is irrigation water in Lucky Peak. And in that amount of the contracted space in the private sector, we have 78% of that water. And yet we would share in no way in the costs and benefits of the project.
Okay, just again, I don't want to get bogged down in these terms which you understand, but I don't. But in essence, you're just saying that you help pay for these projects and now you should get some of the benefits.
Right. And we feel that all the water users on the Boise River should share in the costs and the benefits from this project.
Okay.
And we feel strongly about the fact that Idaho has a beautiful resource of water. We don't have oil wells, and we don't have coal. But we have water, and it's a clean resource. And we feel real strongly that this should be developed for Idaho people and should be controlled by Idaho people.
One of the arguments against, I guess, opening it up and allowing all of these districts in would be running the risk that maybe they would not get the license to build the plant at Lucky Peak, right? Is there a danger in that?
Well, we think that since we have some vested interests, as I pointed out, we were involved in construction of the two Bureau of Reclamation projects, which was Arrowrock and Anderson, and then also we have contractual interest in Lucky Peak. Therefore, we think that we would have a priority because basically the projects were initially ours. You see, from the standpoint of us having water in.
So the project need not, so to speak, go down the stream if
No.
it's not built, construction doesn't start real quick.
We're saying let's take another look and bring everybody in.
Okay.
And go forth with a new license. We have also have one of the irrigation districts in our group that has committed themselves to be the lead group, and we would then go forth with attempting to get a license and develop the project.
Let me just ask you finally, and then we'll go back to Mr. Van Kuren here. It's been said by some who oppose the way this project is being structured, as you do, that selling this power out of state might actually be a violation of the state law, I think.
Yes,
If I understand it correctly.
there is a statute to that effect.
Okay. So that's another reason for not doing it in the way,
Right.
in the way it's been proposed. Well, let me go back to Mr. Van Kuren on a couple of these points. Why not let all 56 of those districts in?
At this point in time, I don't know how we would manage, I frankly don't know how we'd manage that. If we lose a license, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission has made it very plain we have no more voice or can't have any more application for 6 months. That's where we stand
So
today.
there could be a real risk of losing the license to
That's
someone
right.
else.
Yeah, as far as just adding to at this point in time, I can't see any way to add to or transfer or anything.
Well, is it unfair, as I think I heard Mr. Vogt say, unfair to these folks that they're not going to get some of the benefits of this project?
Well, I'm not sure that they don't benefit. It seems to me like the project is constructed up there. We'll put a new bypass tube or a tunnel up there at the reservoir, which will guarantee irrigation water. If the primary tube is shut down or has to be shut down for any reason, it's always been a concern of ours. The management of flood control can go along at a more uniform pace when you've got two possible outlets in the reservoir. We don't question the various districts' participation in the upstream reservoirs. I guess it's only fair for the 5 districts to say that their participation is far greater than all of the other districts put together. But then that isn't what we're leaning on. We're leaning on as a priority matter, we lean on this concession at Arrowrock for the power rights. That's where we got our priority at Lucky Peak.
Mr. Vogt?
We too had a right in Arrowrock, and as Mr. Van Kuren pointed out, the concession, originally there was power proposed in Arrowrock. Since we were a party to the construction of Arrowrock, we also had a right. Now, how could they transfer our right to Lucky Peak? You see, this raises that question, a legal question.
Mr. Van Kuren?
Well, I was under the impression, and I could be wrong, I was under the impression that all of the contractors in Arrowrock were under the Warren Act except the 5 districts, which makes some difference. And I'm not going to argue with Harry because he's a neighbor, but I don't believe that the power right is written into their repayment contract.
Okay, well, I think we could probably go back and forth on this for a good long while and not
yes,
settle it.
certainly.
Let me ask you, Mr. Van Kuren, one other point that Mr. Vogt makes about the possible illegality of the sale of this power to Seattle City Light.
I really can't speak to that. Certainly Seattle is outside of the state of Idaho, but I don't know who we would have contracted a sale with that would guarantee that the power would have stayed in Idaho.
Mr. Vogt?
Well, we think that again, that the project can go forth with a new license, a new application, and then we would include all the water users. And the Boise project, or the 5 districts, would share greatly in that. Now, getting back to the power.
Let me just interrupt for a second here. Mr. Van Kuren says, though, that there's a danger of losing that license. You don't think that danger's there?
No, because as I said before, since we have a vested interest in the 3 reservoirs, we would have priority over, say, some company coming in from out of state and filing for the power.
The other point you wanted to make was about the out-of-state sale of the power, I think.
Well, again, on the out-of-state part, we still raise the question now, why would Seattle come in if they didn't feel they were going to have grossly benefit from this project? And a few years ago, you know, in 1977, we had a drought year in this area, and a lot of people were really scurrying. Where are we going to get power for Idaho? And so we feel that we should be harnessing that power for local use.
Okay, well, gentlemen, we'll come back. More on this issue now of selling this Idaho-generated electricity out of the state, and for that we go to Public Utilities Commissioner Perry Swisher. He is a member of the Idaho PUC. Mr. Commissioner, how do you size up this project? Is there some danger in selling this power out of state?
I don't see the danger. Idaho's a power importer, Mark. Let's start on the eastern slope and quickly go across the state. Over 90% of the electricity consumed in the Utah Power and Light area is imported into Idaho, and it's made with coal. When you get to the Idaho Power Company system, we rely on the Jim Bridger plant heavily. We now rely on the Valmy plant in Nevada. We have backup power at the Boardman plant in Oregon. When you reach northern Idaho, Washington Water Power Company is a mix of mid-Columbia hydro, a little bit of northern Idaho and western Montana hydro, and a whole bunch of Washington State coal plant. And finally, Pacific Power and Light Company generates no power in Idaho, but does service a piece of the Panhandle. It's pretty archaic to think of the region, since the Northwest Power Act, as being one in which each state husbands its energy resources. So I don't think that's at issue, and I understand what Mr. Vogt's talking about on laws that restrict what you can do, but those date back to the old public versus private power fights, and I suspect third-party interests like the investors would quickly invoke the Commerce Clause and say electricity doesn't stop flowing at the state line.
So that Idaho Code, which has been widely quoted, Section 61-327, doesn't apply here? Antiquated?
Well, the real investors, for payoff purposes, are the people who buy the securities that finance the project. Those third-party interests would quickly assert their rights under the Commerce Clause. The Commerce Clause simply is that most frequently cited language in the federal Constitution. In cases like this, it says you cannot operate a state autonomously when you're dealing with commerce.
It would make sense to a lot of people, though, who maybe live in this Boise Valley, to look up there and see all that potential and say, gee, why are we selling it to Seattle? Why can't we use it here?
Well, if they keep doing that, I guess it'll be like, I'm quite grateful to Senator McClure for excluding downtown Boise's BRA area from his wilderness bill. And I think the conversation could go on for another generation. The debate could go on. It's true that Lucky Peak Dam, particularly because of that spout, is visible and excites people's imagination. But what doesn't excite people's imagination is that the lights that we're sitting under at this moment, of course, are fed by power from out of state.
So the bottom line is it's all part of the same pie, and it doesn't make a whole lot of difference where the piece comes from.
It doesn't separate very well, including electricity itself is not.
Does it make good sense, energy and public policy sense, to build a hydroelectric facility at that dam?
It makes good sense to build hydroelectric facilities wherever they're feasible. It's the most beautiful electricity we get. It's the most environmentally benign over the long haul. It is the cheapest. The water is hauled up by nature and stored in the mountains, and we just trip it on its way back to the ocean. We don't have any finer form of electricity than hydro in general terms. So yes, it makes sense to develop it. I'm sure I don't belong in the dispute between these two parties, but I do belong in the dispute that says that there comes a time when disputes are counterproductive, and the benefits that would come from a project involving 55 districts, I'm thinking of suppose the format were the same as the Boise Board of Control, and you have to get approval in 55 districts, or 56. That's a lot of work, and that could take years, and if it only took one Russian veto out of 56, I'm confident that anyone who had an interest in succeeding the Boise Board of Control as the licensee could easily turn 1 out of 56 districts. After all, 2 went down out of 5.
So that's, is that the danger in not okaying the project now, as you see it? That, well, I'll ask you to insert yourself in that part of this debate at least, about whether it's likely that that license will ultimately benefit some people who live and work in this valley.
FERC licenses are anything but automatic. Other parties can and do come in. The same people, Pacific Northwest Generating, who had the Eagle Rock application below the American Falls Dam, are still viable. There are other parties, perhaps Idaho Power, I don't know what their interests might be, other co-generating groups, municipalities throughout the region. So it's not just a discussion here in the valley. Any major remaining hydro site is not going to be decided by some local debate. It will be decided by a federal agency with the licensing power, and not by the Idaho PUC, right, and not by the irrigators here.
Mr. Vogt, Commissioner Swisher seems to be saying that license could be up for grabs if it doesn't go.
We disagree. We believe that it could be done on the basis of one irrigation district taking the lead and then inviting all the other districts to participate. And we think that we would have a coalition that could work effectively. The other groups would be asked to participate in costs and benefits, and they could elect to participate or not. But we believe we would have a coalition that could effectively develop the project.
Commissioner?
Well, just quickly, Mark, the case law we've had in the Whoops question and elsewhere in the region in the last 2 or 3 years say, those decisions say you can't create a debt obligation without a vote of the people in any of these local units sponsoring power projects.
Mr. Vogt?
We believe it could be financed through private enterprise by having one district. We could have more than one district. Take the lead, and the other groups come in on the basis of their participation.
Well, let me invite Mr. Van Kuren back in this. You see it differently, I'm sure.
Yes, I still believe that no matter which way we turn, and I speak of the 5 districts, no matter which way we turn, we're going to be out to the electorate before we're done. Whether it be the absolute bond issue, or whether it be in contractual sales or whatever, somewhere we've got to go back to the people. And that's just where we are today.
Quick comment on that, Mr. Vogt?
Well, again, in our process, we would have a lead district, as I've mentioned, and then, of course, the other groups would have to vote whether or not they were going to participate. But if we had private enterprise financing the venture, then we wouldn't be involved in the bond elections.
Commissioner, on that point, Idaho Power Company at one time had an interest in this project. Simplot did, and perhaps many others that we don't know about. How viable is that?
Well, that's what I meant by saying that when you go before the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, the other players all have their plans, and who gets the benefits from what license ultimately comes down, we don't know. You know, in May of 1984.
Right.
We do know in May of 1984 that the Boise project gets the benefits if the generators go in. But on another go-around on licensing, it's all speculation.
Let me raise another question in the brief time that remains, gentlemen. Commissioner Swisher, what does the difficulty that this project has had coming about, 8 years, and as I mentioned, some of the history earlier, what does it say about the viability of other projects by irrigation districts in other parts of the state? There's a huge amount of potential, but just how realistic is it, given all the difficulties we've been discussing here?
It's pretty realistic, district by district, Highline Canal by Highline Canal, drop by drop. It's not only a potential, it's an actuality. And several canal companies do have projects either producing power at this moment or under construction or under negotiation with Idaho Power to buy that juice. So the canal companies over time, Mark, are definitely going to add to our hydro resource and are definitely going to appreciate some revenues from their water resource.
Do you agree, Mr. Van Kuren? What would your advice be to other people who are in the same kind of position you are here with this kind of potential? Should they plunge ahead?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, I agree that the potential is there. As long as they have the desire and the energy to push it through to fruition, why, full steam ahead.
But it's not going to be easy.
It's not going to be easy, no way.
Mr. Vogt, what do you say about that? Is there potential there for other irrigation districts? Set this issue aside for a moment.
Well, we believe that the potential is there, and we believe that it will go ahead in a lot of the other groups, because we also feel that water rights and power rights are closely related. On this venture, they were separated, but we don't really believe that's right. Going back to the history of the Boise River, we had the development start in about 1860. And the first in time, first in right. Now we have another issue where the power rights are going out, and yet the people that had the water right did the actual construction of the facility. So we really think the two ought to go together wherever we can. At least the people that have the vested interest should have the opportunity to say whether or not they want to participate. In this case, we didn't. We were excluded.
Mr. Van Kuren, I don't want to go back to that debate, but let me just ask you, do you have a prediction on how this is going to go tomorrow?
No, I wouldn't make any prediction. I just want to say one thing. An irrigation right is not a power right in the state of Idaho.
Okay, but close election again tomorrow?
Oh, I'm confident. We'll have a better turnout, a better vote percentage this time than we had last time.
Mr. Van Kuren, Mr. Vogt, Commissioner Swisher, we thank you, gentlemen, for joining us tonight. Appreciate it.
Sure.
That's our time for tonight. We'll be back tomorrow. I'm Mark Johnson. Good night.
The funding for this program is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and the Friends of 4, 10, and 12.